Good morning. This is Max Grossman with the El Paso Taxpayer Revolt, and we are honored to welcome today Mr. Kenneth Bell, who is a candidate for District 3. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you for having me.
Can I call you Ken?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. We're going to learn all about Ken's background. We're going to talk about his policies and how he feels about the current city rep of District 3, Cassandra Hernandez. Why don't we begin, Ken, with your story? Where are you from?
So I was born in Washington, D.C. I grew up in Maryland, Silver Spring and Beltsville, Maryland, both right outside of the capital of D.C. Then 2012, I joined the Army. I was stationed at Fort Bliss, and I've been here ever since.
Wow. And how long is that? About how many years?
About 12 years.
Okay. And what unit have you served in, just out of curiosity?
So when I was active, I served with 229 FA, which was then reflagged to 41 FA. And then I transitioned to the reserves. I've been with 410 Civil Affairs. But I also have to mention that this is not an endorsement from the Department of the Army or Department of Defense.
I understand. And so first of all, thank you for your service. We appreciate that very much here. And were you deployed or always stationed at the fort?
So in 2022, I was sent to Central America for a 9-month rotation in Guatemala as part of the Civil Affairs Persistent Engagement Mission.
Okay, excellent. And how long have you lived in District 3?
Since about 2016, when I moved off of Fort Bliss.
Okay, so for about 8 years.
Yeah.
And currently you're reserve?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Okay. And why don't you tell us why you're interested in running for District 3? Why do you want to represent District 3?
So I'm running for District 3 because I want to make sure that our community continues to have a voice on council, next year and the next few years going forward. I also want to be a voice for people who feel disenfranchised, who feel forgotten about, who feel like politics is just pay to play, that if you're not wealthy, then what you think doesn't matter.
Right. Okay. And so why don't we start with Cassandra Hernandez. Cassandra Hernandez is serving her second term. She terms out on January 7th, 2025. She is a candidate for mayor, okay, but she did not have to resign to run, so she will serve through January 7th, 2025. There will be 2 full terms, 8 years. And it's no secret that my group is a fierce opponent of hers because of her record. She voted for 6 tax increases. She voted for hundreds of millions of dollars in COs, that's non-voter approved debt. She supported building an arena in Duranguito and displacing people and destroying our history. She supported TERS's tax increment reinvestment zones and open spaces, supported every insolvent project I can think of, ballpark, water parks, trolleys, and never said no to a 380 agreement between the city and developers, and many of those deals went south. From our standpoint, quite frankly, she stands for everything that we stand against, because we stand for fiscal restraint, lower taxation, transparency in government, and she is absolutely on the other side of all of those, not to mention that she was reprimanded for abusing her city privileges and essentially stealing gasoline together with her husband. So, where do you stand in relation to Cassandra Hernandez? What do you think that she did right, and what do you think that she did wrong?
So as far as what she did right, her office has great constituent services. She's always been accessible, and I know a lot of people, and that's why she has so much support in District 3, because she's always made herself available. She's gone to people's houses to meet with them when they weren't able to come down to City Hall, so I do commend her for that. And there were some votes that she has done that I have been supportive of, like the Women's Commission.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else, or just that?
That's what I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay. And what about her record do you oppose?
These certificates of obligations are designed for emergencies. Like if an earthquake were to destroy part of the city, where we wouldn't have time to do a bond to vote on getting money to reconstruct the damage done. That's what certificates of obligation are for. They're not for things that should be covered under a general budget.
Okay, we agree completely. What about her votes to raise taxes?
Yeah, again, a lot of these votes, I've gone to city council and I've opposed some of these votes. Like when Oscar Leeser vetoed some of these tax increases, unfortunately, Representative Cassandra Hernandez was the one to lead the charge to overturn those vetoes. And I've gone to city council, I've spoken out against overturning those vetoes. Unfortunately, the supporters of overturning the veto had the votes.
Right, okay. Let's talk a little bit about just general philosophy to our local government. From our standpoint, there are two primary philosophies that dominate our city council. Number one is you have fairly wealthy families, a small number of them, who contribute disproportionately to elections. They get people in office like Henry Rivera, like Isidro Salcido, like Cassandra Hernandez, who then vote very predictably for large bonds, huge expenditures that benefit the local construction industry, and we've ended up with $2.3 billion of debt in our city, including $852 million in certificates of obligation debt, principal and interest, that our children and grandchildren are going to be paying for the next 30 years. That's a Texas record, $852 million. That is more than the 5 largest cities in Texas combined. And, we feel that's reprehensible. The other philosophy is driven by people like Oscar Leeser, our mayor, and Brian Kennedy, and Joe Molinar, and Art Fierro, and to a lesser extent, Chris Canales. And that calls for spending restraint, not issuing bonds for projects that are excessively expensive, providing the taxpayers with relief. Instead of build it and they will come, it's more lower taxes and they will come. Which side do you support?
So I definitely support tax relief for folks. People are hurting, they're struggling. And my district has a lot of seniors who are on fixed incomes. So when these tax increases hit them, a lot of them may be forced to sell their homes and maybe move in with their children or move to another part of Texas or even move to New Mexico.
Right, and those tax increases really impact renters the most. The poorest El Pasoans, for example, the tenements in our barrios, if their rents go up even $50, they can be homeless.
Right, 100%. And right now, I know over in Chamizal, which is in District 8, a lot of folks they're feeling that. They're feeling what essentially, which is gentrification, where the rents are just rising so that they're being forced out and they can have more desirable tenants or even turn those residential properties into commercial properties.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe, as we do, that El Paso has an oligarchy? A small group of families who wield disproportionate power, have traditionally had disproportionate control of our city and county, and have managed to ram through legislatively their interests, which have cost the taxpayers. Do you believe that such a phenomenon exists?
Yeah, we've seen it. It's not a matter of if it exists. We know it exists. We know who's doing it, and we've seen the damages that's happened. For example, the Great Wolf Lodge debacle in 2018, when our city attorneys told city council that this land swap deal would only go through if Great Wolf Lodge came to El Paso. They pulled out in 2020, the land swap still went through, and then we're being told that they were actually 2 separate deals.
That's exactly right. Carla Neiman in 2018, the city attorney, told city council, responding to a question from Cassandra Hernandez, will the Great Wolf Lodge land swap with Paul Foster and his business partner proceed if Great Wolf Lodge withdraws from the deal? And she said, absolutely not. Great Wolf Lodge withdrew, as you just stated, and the deal went through anyway. And Paul Foster, who had 44 acres of land in Northwest, swapped it for 2,313 acres in Northeast. And we were told that these 2 plots of land were both worth $18.5 million. But then, Ken, to add insult to injury, the city expanded TERS 13, Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone 13, to that entire gigantic plot that Foster acquired. And that means that he gets 75% property tax forgiveness for a half century on the 9,500 units he's planning to build there. And these are middle to upper middle class units We've calculated that the tax abatement is somewhere between $500 million and $1 billion over the life of the TERS. And that would be the largest corporate handout in the history of West Texas. How do you feel about that?
Like you mentioned, it's a corporate handout. Basically, socialism for the rich, and then rugged capitalism for individuals. Like, tiers are designed for to address urban blight. So you go to areas where their buildings are run down, and you create a tiers zone there so that the money stays there to reinvest in that particular area, not for open spaces or for planned communities that are going to be for people who are basically upper and wealthy folks.
Right. Well, so far, Ken, we essentially agree. Let's talk the issues now.
Okay.
I'll ask you some specific questions. So, taxation. The current city council has achieved, for the first time ever, 2 fiscal years in a row of no new revenue. So that means no tax increase for 2 years and not $1 of bonding. No new debt for 2 years to provide some tax relief and to retire some of that debt. In addition, the City Council voted out of existence TRZ2, Transportation Reinvestment Zone number 2, and TERS 10A. So 2 of those TERSs are gone, and the city is saving $9.2 million a year as a result. Brian Kennedy is chair of FOAC, the Financial Oversight and Audit Committee. He's conducted audits of the gas cards, the P cards, the 380 agreements, uprooting corruption, correcting abuses. And it's one thing after another. From our standpoint, after many years of Tommy Gonzalez and especially the mayoral period of D. Margot, the ship is being righted. And do you agree? Do you like the current fiscal direction of City Council? Tax restraint, a stop to bonding, at least for now, and seeking ways to cut waste within government.
Right. This has been, a great new direction that's been going on these past 2 years, thanks, to Brian Kennedy, to Chris Canales, Arfio, those folks. But right now, there are 6 seats up for election.
It's a lot.
That's a lot. So we have to make sure we get the right people in office so that we can continue this course of, no new tax revenue. Because if the people in the other philosophy get in, they get 5 people, and it's game over for us.
But here's the reality. The population of the city of El Paso is decreasing, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. The American Community Survey is a yearly survey of American cities every year, whereas the U.S. Census is every decade, right? Mm-hmm. And according to the U.S. Census Bureau, we've lost 6,000 people net since 2017. We're losing about 1,000 El Pasoans a year. In 2017, El Paso had 683,000 residents. We're down to 677,000. And my contention is that most of these people are leaving to evade taxation, because Sunland Park, I'm looking right over there, Sunland Park and Santa Teresa and Las Cruces, and in the other direction, Socorro, Horizon City are exploding in population, while El Paso has anemic growth at best, in the last several years of population decline. And so we have a ballpark, we have water parks, we just opened La Nube, the Children's Museum, trolleys, all these amenities that are immensely expensive, and none of this has stemmed our population decline. Now, there are people like Cassandra Hernandez who want to double down, and they say, we need to invest more. She's called publicly for another quality of life bond, right? If we spend more, if we invest more, we'll create amenities and draw people to El Paso. Of course, on the other side is more debt. More debt, higher taxes, more people leaving. Do you feel that we need to build more amenities to attract people here?
I think, at least coming from an outside perspective, me coming from the East Coast, El Paso has a lot of great things that we can promote right now that will attract people, which is just a matter of really just promoting that. We have a great outdoors history. Like bouldering, for example, was created in El Paso at Waco Tanks. And you do have bouldering enthusiasts come from different parts of the country to go to Waco Tanks. I think that's something that definitely needs to be promoted. A lot of people don't know that. Also, We have other avenues of tourism, historical tourism. Duranguito being the first neighborhood in El Paso. Pancho Villa used to hang out there a lot. That's something, again, with the right mindset and the right people who are willing to do the work, we can promote these historical sites. McGuffin House, the Trost buildings, but also food and drink tourism is something that I think is criminally underutilized in El Paso.
Right. Mm-hmm. The beer industry, we were talking about that before.
Right. We have 11 craft breweries in El Paso. All are members of the Texas Craft Brewers Guild. And what the Texas Craft Brewers Guild is doing right now is they're creating a Brew City initiative, is what they call it, where they're teaming up with municipalities to essentially promote all of the craft breweries throughout Texas. So they have a map on their website, and you can start, if you want to do the beer tour, start in Texarkana or Houston, and then you come all the way to Lubbock. Now, the problem is that El Paso's not on that map yet. Destination El Paso is working with they've begun conversations with Texas Craft Brewers Guild, and I think with the right city council members, we can definitely essentially put our city on the map and bring in some of that tourism revenue.
So we don't need to build big, new, pretty things. We have plenty of things to showcase now.
Right. It's a matter of showing the world who we are, what makes El Paso unique. Like, we don't need to build like another arena like every other city has. The arenas aren't really all that special. We want to promote things that make El Paso unique so that people want to come to El Paso to experience the real El Paso.
Right. Now, there's a private corporation that's come to El Paso that is building a 12,500 seat amphitheater in Northeast El Paso. And we're all for that. We love when private investors risk their capital and invest in our community rather than government. Should our local governments, city and county, be in the entertainment business?
Well, I mean, I guess to an extent, but it should be limited as far as like being in the entertainment industry. Like you mentioned, the amphitheater has private investors. So we should offer incentives to private investors to build, let them build it, let them take the risk, and then if people come, they get the reward. But they shouldn't be taking a risk with our money.
Right. I know that in the case of the amphitheater, I think it's something like $30 million worth of incentives, but wisely, this city council put in clawback measures. The company has to meet certain metrics, certain targets for employment, for investment. Otherwise, they don't get those incentives, and the city claws back. And that's something that's been missing from a lot of contracts between our city government and private investors that are now in those contracts, right?
Right.
Let's see, what else can we talk about? Are there any policies that you'd like to promote that are near and dear to you? One I know is caps on contributions to elections, $1,000, correct?
Yes. So yeah, with campaign contribution limits, that would essentially limit the power that these wealthy oligarchs are able to, essentially buy elections. So if you cap individual contributions for a maximum of $1,000 per donor per election, that will then force candidates to actually go out there and do the work and reach out to more people rather than just host one or two fundraisers where they invite all the wealthiest people to essentially fund their campaigns. They're going to have to go talk to regular folks. They're going to have to rely more on small dollar donations.
Right.
And then also that the campaign contribution limit would also limit PACs to $5,000 limit.
$5,000, right. So, for example, Renard Johnson, who's the guy who's really raking in a lot of contributions, he got one contribution for $25,000 from a local real estate mogul. And that raised a lot of eyebrows, set a new record, set a new standard. And it worries people like me. I mean, I've managed to donate, I'm on the record, $250, for example, to some of the local races. And this guy is able to donate 100 times more than me to his candidate. And so you feel that needs to be corrected. Would you accept a $25,000 check?
No.
You would limit yourself to 1,000 like Chris Canales did?
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Let me ask you another question. I know that you were president of the, what is it called? The Justicia Fronteriza PAC, which is associated with Veronica Carbajal. I know that PAC promotes progressive candidates. Certain issues like caps on contributions, for example. You were president of that PAC, correct?
I was.
And then you withdrew to run for office?
That's correct.
Because that was required.
Yes.
Okay. And in the past, I think you ran for Democratic precinct chair. Is that correct?
No, I was a state Democratic executive committee man, which is basically board trustees for the Texas Democratic Party.
Okay. And you projected yourself as progressive-leaning, supporter of Bernie Sanders, and that's all fine. But our question is, how would you apply your progressive philosophy to city council? That is, do you believe that city council is a place to opine and promote issues of federal and international significance? Or do you believe a city council rep should stay in his or her lane and focus on streets, police, fire, and the basic functions of government? Because sometimes you get a city council rep who spends a lot of time and energy on issues like abortion, Trump's wall, Gaza, and so on and so forth. And a lot of people object to that and would much rather see these people focus on issues that relate to people's pocketbooks and on the smooth functioning of government. So explain to us, please, how you would apply your progressive philosophy to local government, and what would be your role with regard to your progressive thinking in District 3?
So as regards to what I would do as a candidate, it's basically working in the best interest of my constituents, making their lives better. Now, I don't have any of the wealthy oligarchs living in District 3. There are a few people who are doing well, and that's fine. Well, we need to work to the best interest of the people of District 3 and really the city as a whole. So like you mentioned, making sure that we reduce 911 call times, making sure that our firefighters are fully equipped to fight fires and to pull people out of, rubble and damage. To make sure that public health is of utmost priority, and, fixing our infrastructure and maintaining the infrastructure that's doing well, and then fix and repair infrastructure that is basically crumbling. Now, with regards to like international federal issues, if there's opportunities to have cooperation with federal or state government, with working with our state reps, working with our congresswoman, or working with pretty much anyone, then yes, I'm all for cooperation.
Okay, great. Let me get you on the record on a few issues for our viewers. How do you feel about our police force? Do you think they engage in too many abuses and they need a little bit more oversight? Should they be defunded to any extent, or should they be supported financially and expanded? Where are you on the police?
So when it comes to police, there have been reports of police abuse, and we have to take those seriously.
No doubt.
Right. So like I always say that if we want to protect good cops, we have to get rid of bad cops.
Yes.
Right. We don't want to protect bad cops because then the good cops are the ones who basically suffer. But also, we also need to make sure we're continuing supporting crisis intervention teams, folks that go out who are trained to address mental health issues.
Right.
To go out there with the police, because our police are not trained to identify someone who's going through a mental health crisis, but a crisis intervention person would be. And I think that not only protects the individuals from themselves or others, but it also protects the city, protects the police from lawsuits.
I see. Do you support defunding the police to any extent at all?
So when people talk about defunding the police, what they really mean is they want to have funds go towards things that would actually address issues of poverty, which oftentimes leads to crime. So, and it really, that starts at like the youth level, when kids, they live in rough neighborhoods, they don't have access to like amenities or access to after school activities. Oftentimes they are seduced and recruited by criminal activities. Right.
So you're saying that some people hold that a portion of the police budget should be diverted for purposes that really help people. Am I understanding?
Maybe not necessarily directly from the police budget, but a portion of like a city's budget or a county's budget should be going towards efforts that would in fact prevent people from being lured into crime.
If you're on the city council, would you advocate reducing the police budget?
Well, the state has prohibited that from happening, so it wouldn't be allowed.
Okay. Let's talk about climate change. Proposition K was controversial. It was rejected overwhelmingly by the voters. And in our view, it was rejected not so much because El Paso is a city of climate deniers. That's not the reason. But primarily because there were provisions in Proposition K that were unreasonable, that penalized industry to a very large extent, that could have been very costly, like choking off water to fossil fuel power plants that are within the city limits. There were certain things in there that were eyebrow raising and that people felt were poison pills. Were you a supporter of Proposition K?
So, on the record, yes, I was a supporter of Proposition K, and mainly because I do believe that climate change is an existential threat. Now, like you mentioned, many of the people who rejected Proposition K, they were not climate deniers. I spoke with one person who does have solar panels on his house who also rejected Proposition K. But I think the essence of Proposition K was to really have our city take climate change seriously. So having an office of climate change and having the director report directly to city council versus having them report to the city manager, who at the time was Tommy Gonzalez, who, as you stated before, was highly controversial, highly unpopular. And so, yeah, I was not a fan of Tommy Gonzalez. Neither were any of the folks from Sunrise, El Paso.
Right, yeah. And what about Nicole Farini? She's in charge of the climate office. She has a staff of 5. Proposition C passed in a recent election, which provided $5 billion for climate initiatives. But some of the climate people I'm talking to, some of the advocates for addressing climate change, are pretty upset with her and don't feel that the money's being spent properly and are worried about her leadership. What do you think of Farini's job? Think she's doing okay?
Well, right now, like you mentioned, the Proposition K passed, I believe, 2022 it was, that fall. And so the climate department was created in 2023. So she's still fairly new to this. I'm not sure exactly what her qualifications were as far as like working in climate change. I know she's been a city employee for many years, and I know she cares about the environment. But I would say she's kind of doing okay right now, given that she's also working with her previous department, which I cannot remember the name of it off the top of my head. So she's running 2 departments right now. So right now, her time and her efforts are kind of divided. So
right, okay. Would you support an initiative compelling the city to divest from Israel?
Well, right now I'm not sure what financial contributions the city is making towards Israel, so that's something I'd have to look into.
Let's say that they were invested in funds that benefited the state of Israel. Would you be in favor of divestment if that were on the table?
I'd have to look. We'd have to see what the actual benefit is specifically, and take it on a case by case basis.
Okay. Who on city council do you support? That is, let me put it to you this way. Are there any members of city council you admire for the job that they're doing, in particular?
Well, I do admire Mayor Leeser for the work that he's done.
Okay.
He's been great as far as like taxation and being a great representative of the city. Okay.
Any city council reps who you think are doing a particularly good job or who are particularly committed to the residents of El Paso?
I think Chris Canales has been a great representative for El Paso, especially El Paso's Black community. He and his wife, who works at the History Museum, have definitely been supporters of like the McCall Center, supporters of the NAACP. Also, Art Fierro as well. Justicia Fronteriza endorsed him when he ran for city council in 2022. So
yes. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
So I was saying, yeah, I think Art Fierro has kind of held the line on taxes as well. So I do admire him as well.
Okay, excellent. Do you think if elected that you would work well with the current city council?
I do, but also we have to remember that 6 of those seats are up for election right now.
Right, and there could be a realignment.
Right, but Canales and Farrell will still be there, but we're going to have a new mayor. We're going to have a new representative for District 1, for sure. District 2 is up for re-election. We'll have District 4 is up for re-election. 5, we're going to have a new representative, and we'll have a new representative for 7 as well.
That's correct. Yeah, those are all very competitive races. Are there any other issues you'd like to make our viewers aware of that you would bring to City Council, just to give you the opportunity to add anything you'd like?
Well, these next few years are going to be, it's going to be interesting these few years. So what issues we can get done, obviously is going to depend on who we get elected. But one thing I do want to talk about, I talk about a lot, is animal services. Like, we have a lot of strays throughout our city. I know my district has a lot of stray cats.
Yeah.
And so we need to increase spaying and neutering of these strays to keep the population from breeding out of control. And animal services has been, overworked, underfunded, underappreciated. Now, they do have 2 new shelters open because one of Fred Wilson's is at capacity. But a lot of my constituents that I've spoke to had problems with just cats like coming into their yard, using it as their own kitty litter. Now, some are okay with the cats being there because they kill mice. So the rodent problem is under control, but we also need to make sure that we're not just letting the cats just, breed out of control.
Right, no, we agree with you. That's a major issue and a real problem. What about your strategy? How's your campaign going? You're doing a lot of block walking. How's your effort going?
Yeah, I've been block walking since July, so I block walk 5 or 6 days a week. It's going well. A lot of the people I talk to have said that I'm the only candidate who's knocked on their doors or even reached out to them. So we're canvassing, we're text banking, we're phone banking. So this is a serious effort, and I take this seriously, and I really want to reach out to as many of District 3 voters as I can to let them know that, I'm a serious candidate. This is a serious campaign, and I want to be their representative.
Okay, excellent. If people choose to support you, Ken, how do they find you online?
My website is kennethbelltx.com.
kennethbelltx.com.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, look, this has been very interesting. We learned about you, and we appreciate your taking the time to be interviewed by the El Paso Taxpayer Revolt.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken. And thank you again for your service to our country.
Also, thank you for your support.